to the second in the IPTF Industry Conversations, and today we're focused on the value of value-added services. So value-added services is very, very important to me personally, as well as the industry. In 2018, I had a heart attack out of the blue. I was very fortunate. I got rushed to hospital. I had a heart bypass operation. A year later, I had another heart attack. And the NHS fixed me again, and they were fantastic. But what they didn't say is, why are you having a heart attack? I was very young at that time. I didn't smoke, I was a vegetarian, and I had a very healthy lifestyle. When I engaged with my value-added services, which at the time was Best Doctors, which is now part of Teledoc, they took the time to listen to me. They looked at all the evidence, they gathered it together, and they concluded that I might have some kind of genetic issue. Turned out I did have a genetic issue. Now, that was fine. It was a little bit too late to do anything about mine, but what it wasn't too late to do was test my children, and not just my children, but my cousins and family's children, to see if they had the same genetic condition. As it turned out, 2 of my 3 children do have the same genetic condition. And today, the good news is we know about it. So they are now having treatment to prevent them from having a heart attack, risk dying from a heart attack, and not have to go through the dramatic surgery that I had to. So that's the power of value-added services from my own personal perspective. Let's hear a little bit more about value-added services and what it means to the industry. I am delighted to welcome some great guests from across the industry, but rather than me introduce them, let me ask them to introduce themselves. So if I could ask each of our panellists to just 30 seconds, who are you, what's your role, and what's your interest in value-added services, that would be fantastic. So Kevin, can I start with you, please?
Thanks, Vic. Kevin McGeish, Vantage Wealth Management. I'm a financial advisor, and I'd say my interest in value-added services is just, particularly when I'm speaking to clients, is helping them understand them and see how they can really see the value in their policy that they've taken out.
That's lovely. Thanks, Kevin. Steve, over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Casey, and I'm the Marketing Director of Square Health. We provide a range of health and wellbeing services, generally accessed through app technology.
Thank you very much, Steve. Jamie, over to you.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Page. I'm Head of Protection Distribution at the Exeter. What value-added services means to me, or the value of them, for me, the value-added services have evolved into a core part of the proposition, and they're how advisors increasingly demonstrate everyday tangible value to their clients.
Thanks, Jamie. Dave.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Dave Marcus, 35 years in healthcare and protection. I'm the European Client Director at Teledoc Health, who you may also know as Best Doctors. We're the world's largest virtual care provider. I live in Knutsford, Cheshire, and I'm a critical illness claimant. And it's fair to say 5 years ago, these services saved my life.
Thank you, Dave. That's great. Sam, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Hudson. I'm the Managing Director of RedArc. And for me, value-added services are absolutely critical because we take out protection policies to give us money when the worst things happen. But I think we all know, and Dave just alluded to the fact that when you make a claim, the impact of that is really widespread. It could affect your mental health, your ability to navigate health systems and get the resources you need, manage the impact on your family and friends. And that's exactly what RedArc does. It's an opportunity, along with other value-added services, to treat the claimant in a holistic way and to give more support other than just the cash, which is incredibly welcome. But as we all know, you need more than money.
Thank you, Sam. That's lovely. And last but not least, Tim.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Tim Smith, Head of Protection at Hanover Re. From my perspective, value-added services should really complement the core benefits of a protection policy and really make the most of the natural alignment of interest that there is between customers and providers and provide them with something that's really valuable to them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and everyone, and welcome. So we're going to get straight on with it now and talk about why value-added services matter. We've mentioned a few reasons, but Jamie, coming to you first, What role do value-added services propositions play in the Exeter's overall customer and commercial strategy?
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. For us, value-added services are not just an add-on anymore. They're a core part of both our customer proposition, but also importantly, our commercial strategy. So at a customer level, they shift insurance from being something you hope you never need into something that delivers value every single day. The growth we've seen in engagement with our HealthWise value-added services policy really enforces that point. So in 2025, downloads increased by a massive 69%. So that's a huge amount. And more than half of those users are actually repeat users, which start to actually tell us that members aren't just trying it once, they're actively building these services into how they manage their own health, their well-being, and also into their lifestyle, which is important. What's particularly encouraging is the breadth of engagement. So we're seeing strong uptake across the dietitian support, nutrition, and also lifestyle guidance, along also with the health MOTs. So that starts to reflect a clear shift towards more proactive, preventative healthcare, and importantly, access to trusted, expert-led support at the point people actually need it.
That's great. Thanks, Jamie. That's lots of interesting stats and facts there. Tim, coming to you from a reinsurance perspective, are you seeing value-added services influencing product design and decisions at your stage?
Yeah, we certainly are. So from a reinsurance perspective, I guess what we really care about is any value-added services that are going to have some impact on the ultimate sort of claim rates. So we're interested in things, obviously, that will help our clients to sell their products. But if it's purely an engagement push, then it might as well be the insurer just working with a third party to try and sort of bring a marketing spin to their product. Where we're really interested is something that actually drives healthier decision-making by policyholders, insights into their health, or maybe acute warnings about issues. So we see things, for example, with wearables that might pick up background health issues. And that can be really interesting from our point of view in terms of early intervention and really helping to stop something ultimately getting to the stage where somebody needs to make an insurance claim.
Thanks very much, Tim. That's really interesting. So, Kevin, from your point of view as an advisor, when you're recommending an insurer to a client, do the value-added services products that they actually provide make a difference? Do they influence your decision?
Yeah, absolutely, Vic. I think they play a massive part, particularly where the providers are quite close in price. This can aid my decision making on making the correct recommendation for the client, particularly in relation to their circumstances and where providers actually differ on the value-added services. So let's say a particular provider is more tiered towards mental health support, that may make me choose them opposed to the other.
How well do you feel you and other advisors understand the value-added services available to them? What makes it easy or difficult to engage with those providers?
I think personally for me, coming from a protection background through my time at AIG and having a protection policy myself, I definitely see the value in value-added services, and I use my own value-added service from my protection policy. But for some advisors, I do hear and find that it is quite hard for them to keep up, particularly with the constant changing, and maybe there's not that much differentiation sometimes between providers. So I think the providers that really stand out are the ones who try and be different and really sell their value-added services by using stories of clients who've used them in the past and how it's aided them.
Thanks, Kevin. And Jamie, as a provider, what do you currently do to support advisor education, and what do you think the industry could do more of?
Yeah, so for us, advisor education on value-added services is really not just distribution responsibility, but also it's a marketing one, because value-added service only delivers value if the advisor feels confident using it in real customer conversation. So I think the point that you're making there as well, Kevin, if you understand it, you're then able to sort of have those necessary discussions with the customer.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. That's interesting. And so, Tim, from your perspective, are you seeing any gaps in advisor understanding of value-added services? And if you are, Could you pinpoint what those gaps may be?
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging things for advisors is perhaps being able to put a value on these services. I think, they can compare two products in every other respect. That's the core part of their job. And then, as Kevin mentioned, if you've got two that are quite similar in price, but one has maybe the slightly more expensive one has slightly more in the way of value-added services. How do you really put a value on that so that you can advise the customer which would be in their best interests? And I think that is just a very tricky question to answer, because we've seen very different take-up rates amongst different services.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks. And I think also, just to add to that from my own experience, sometimes when compliance are asking a reason why and an advisor hasn't chosen the cheapest or the top three on price, very often then value-added services comes into play. So there is a value, but what is the value of that? So your point is well made. Sam, from RedArc's perspective, what misconceptions, if any, do you see advisors having about your services?
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. It's a great question. I think sometimes advisors think that it's just a nice chat with a nurse. And there is a huge amount of benefit just from having somebody independent and knowledgeable to talk about. And in fact, when we do our patient surveys, one of the things that patients value the most is the fact they have somebody that has the time to talk to them and will listen. We all know if you go and see a GP, you've got 15, 20 minutes tops and you're out the door. We don't put any time limits on the conversations that nurses have with your clients or our patients, as we call them. So I think there is a bit of a misconception it's just talking. So there is a benefit of that. But the way that I think about the service, if you're an advisor, you do a fact find, that's exactly what the nurse does. They'll do a fact find with that patient to find out what is it that patient needs. And I think that's where the misunderstanding, if there is any, comes from, because we can deal with any serious physical and mental health condition. We cover bereavement in both adults and children, and then provide a solution which matches what that patient needs, just in the same way as an advisor does. They'll recommend the right policies at the right premium for the client. That's exactly what the nurse does. What does that person need to make their situation better? Do they need counselling? Do they need physio? Do they need some extra resources? Do they need pointing in the right direction? Do they need a second medical opinion? It's really tailoring it down. So much more than the chat, I would say, Vicky.
Actually, that's really good, isn't it? I mean, one thing that we all struggle with this day and age is finding people to listen to us who've got the time to listen to us. So that in itself is really powerful. So thank you, Sam. Steve, from your perspective, what misconceptions do you see advisors having about your services at Square Health?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Vicky. I mean, first and foremost, one of the misconceptions we see is that all services are the same, and that is patently not the case. There are a whole range of services, both reactive and proactive, that are now available in the market that can have quite a material impact in ultimately the claims rates that Tim mentioned earlier on. One of the facets that we see is accessibility to these services. How does the customer actually get access to, say, a GP consultation, a mental health and wellbeing, or a health MOT? At times, this can be quite complicated. But one of the things that we've tried to do, as have others, in terms of making it as vanilla as possible, i.e. the services can be accessed in exactly the same way. So again, removing hurdles or barriers from the customer to get access to those services.
Okay, so that's great. Thanks, Steve. Jamie, who owns the education for the advisor? Is it the insurer or is it the value-added services provider?
Really good question. I actually think the simple answer is that ownership is shared, but the responsibility is distinct. So let me try and explain that. So providers are the experts in the services themselves. They understand the detail, the clinical path, how the service delivers positive outcomes. So insurers have that responsibility to translate that expertise into a coherent proposition, making sure advisors understand not just what's available, but why it matters and how it fits into the product. Where it becomes really powerful is when the advisors are part of that education loop as well. So advisors are the closest to the customer. They understand the individual needs, the circumstance, the context and timings far better than any centrally designed message could ever possibly deliver. So every advice conversation, I believe, is different. So when education is treated as sort of that shared ecosystem rather than a handoff, value-added services becomes easier to explain, more naturally positioned, and far more likely to be used, which is where positive customer outcomes really start to show up.
I guess there's possibly a distinction here between the point of sale and the ongoing use. So I think at point of sale, clearly it's on the advisor, but it's really on the insurer to have explained to the advisor what the benefits are on offer. But I think as soon as a customer has a policy, then I think there's much more scope for the provider to get involved in that discussion, to promote the use of these value-added services, and really then ensure that policyholders start to see the value.
Dave, you're nodding?
Yeah, I agree. So for the question, who owns the education? I think it's everybody. It's the provider, it's the insurer, it's the brokers themselves, and it's the media that revolves around this industry. I always think one of the key lessons that maybe we don't share with advisors enough is these services are a great way of getting referrals, because like all of us who've bought protection, any advisor worth of salt at the end of that process will ask that question: who among your friends, family and colleagues can benefit from my support? Being British, we're all a bit funny when it comes to money. So quite often we don't give those referrals and we feel uncomfortable. But if your advisor says, Dave, who's going to benefit from getting access to a GP, a second medical opinion, mental health for them and the family, it's a much softer way of getting a referral, and you're much more likely to share that. So I think it's everybody's role.
Thanks, Dave. Kevin, as an advisor, do you agree with Dave?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a collaborative approach across the board, and that's why I try and, once I've recommended the policy, as soon as I'm doing the application with the client, I want to make sure that they are aware of the value-add service that they're going to get access to. And then once the policy is in place, I always book a follow-up call with the client to help them get set up on the app or whatever it may be, so that they're aware of the services.
And Kevin, still with you, when you do introduce, you've talked about a product and you've got the need, and you talk about the core product, and then you bring in value-added services, how do your clients react?
It's a funny one, actually, as some clients, I guess it's a bit of a misconception from insurance as a whole. They sort of see this as a way for the client, the insurer, to possibly be spying on the client and maybe see that they're, going to use it as a way to not pay out a claim. But I think it alludes earlier to what Tim had said, and the insurer is only trying to help you at this stage and make sure if anything is there, we kind of catch on before it gets serious. So I think then it falls on the advisor's job to alleviate that misconception and make them more aware of what the product is and how it can actually help them, and actually provide that value from day one, opposed to something that's only going to provide value if the worst is to happen at the end of the policy.
Tim, from a reinsurance point of view, if a customer wants to cancel their cover, very often a retention team within a provider will talk about value-added service, saying, you're going to lose access to this. Do you think it's actually having a difference, value-added services, on persistency in the market and retaining policies?
Yeah, I think it definitely is. It is one of these things that's very difficult to measure. But we do have situations where clients we work with have, it's not really a value-added service, but a sort of additional service maybe that is an optional extra, a true optional extra that the policyholder will pay more for. And so a good example will be something that covers, say, treatment abroad if you're diagnosed or your family is diagnosed with a particular condition. And that might be a small additional cost to the policyholder. But we do see very significantly different lapse rates between people that have opted to buy that and people that haven't, suggesting that where people do really value some additional wraparound benefits with their cover, if they can sort of be reminded of the value of them, then that really does impact that retention discussion.
That's fantastic to hear for everybody on this call. Value-added services being powerful at the point of sale, during the life of a policy, at point of claim, but also commercially as a retention tool, which is fantastic. So Dave, coming to you, what do you think makes your services feel tangible and relevant in the moment someone is either claiming or cancelling their policy?
I think it goes back to education. I think first off, it always surprises me when people ask what I do, if I'm in a pub, in a restaurant, if I'm in a work environment, and I talk about the services, quite often people are surprised. And it really concerns me. And it kind of goes back to the same conversation with people not having enough protection in their lives, not really knowing who a good IFA would be or how to reach an IFA. So the education piece is making sure everybody who's got a policy knows exactly what's there, how they use it, who's eligible to use it. It's generally across these services. It's not just the policyholder, it's their family, it's quite often their children. And it's bringing that policy to life. The challenge you've got if you buy protection is, in reality, nobody wants to buy it because it's an outgoing. But if you've got a good advisor, they explain to you the value it brings. And actually, to make sure that you understand you can't do without this. Bad things happen to people. But when you buy that policy, it goes in a drawer. It's forgotten. It's in that drawer where you don't want to open it again, and hopefully you never need to claim on the policy. The challenge, therefore, is how do we bring the services to life when the policy's forgotten? How do you remember when you've got a cough, a cold, when you're anxious, when you're tired, when something feels wrong, that actually you've got access to these wonderful services? And I think maybe at the core of all of this, and a few of the experts here have talked about this today, about their core, they're essential. I think the term value-added services, and Vicky, we've had this chat many times, it's the wrong term. These are essential services. They're no longer added value. They're integral. They make a difference to lives. They make a difference to people who don't have the policyholder in terms of their partners and their children. It's doing the right thing. So I think the more we can get this message out and educate people, educate the broker, the customer, that comes from the provider, it comes from the supplier, it comes from the insurer, the more people actually see real success and benefit from using these.
Thanks, Dave. Same question to you, Steve.
Yeah, Dave makes some really, really interesting points there. I mean, education is absolutely fundamental. And we see a range of opportunities for both the intermediary as well as the provider to engage with the customer on a regular basis, banging the drum about these services, these essential services that Dave mentions there. I mean, on some of our portfolios, Jamie mentioned, over half are repeat users. The highest portfolio we've got within Square Health, over 70% of users are repeat users. They become ambassadors for the service. They've used the service, they understand it, and they understand how they can use it. And that's fundamentally important. I mean, an example, a little bit old now, but a couple of years ago, you probably remember the public health concerns regarding strep A and scarlet fever that hit the UK. We saw a huge uptake in GP consultations all through the night for children, where perhaps little Johnny had woken up and with a rash or what have you, a fever. We were able to provide the support to the husband and the wife around everything was, generally A-OK. So it really is the case, an educational point. And the last point I'd make on it really also, Vic, is get accessibility to these services when you don't need it, whether it's putting a telephone number into your phone, whether it's downloading and authenticating an app. Do it when you don't need it. So when you do need it, it can be used quickly and efficiently.
Thanks, Steve. I mean, I think that's what Kevin was saying. One of the things he does, which is fantastic, is once a customer has cover, he will take the time to make sure they've got the app, got the information. I guess, Kevin, for that very reason, yeah?
Yes, yeah. I think it helps to not make the policy something that they put in the drawer and forget about, as I think Steve alluded to earlier. Providing that value throughout them actually having the policy and using it, increases the engagement with the plan, and they actually feel that they're getting something for what they pay for, opposed to something that could be going nowhere. And particularly when a client faces financial hardship or all the bills have gone up, that the first thing that's going to go is their protection. Is that going to be the case if they're engaged with it and, that their child's possibly used the online GP service?
Education is the reason that the IPTF exists and was set up and continues to exist. So education is a real challenge. Educating advisors is difficult enough. Educating consumers is on a whole nother difficult level in terms of accessing them and speaking to them. Jamie, what do we do to help ensure that customers do know that they've got access to these essential services, as Dave calls them, which I 100% agree with, during the life of their policy?
So from a provider perspective, once a policy is live, the key for us is recognising that awareness isn't just a one-off moment, has to be reinforced over time, but also importantly in the right context.
Thanks, Jamie. And Sam, from your perspective and in your experience, what engagement strategies you actually drive awareness and, I guess, usage over time?
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. A few things I completely agree with Jamie. I think the most important thing is you have to have an engagement strategy, and that strategy has to be one that doesn't just remind a client of the value-added or essential services they have every now and again. People don't always remember they have a policy. So I was talking to a Macmillan support worker a few weeks ago, and she told me that you would be amazed when people are referred to them. One of the questions they ask is, do you have an insurance policy that can help you with this? And she said the number of people that went, I might have, and next time she speaks to them, they found the policy. So that's where we're starting from a lot of the time. People don't remember they have them. So between insurers and distributors and those of us that provide these services, we have to do this all the time, not just as a one-off. And I think the things that really work well are case studies. In particular for our Red Arc service, a really good case study brings to life what can be a less easy thing to describe. The second thing is making sure that we train staff in insurers, particularly claim staff, but also spend time with their marketing teams and then also with distributors. We run a number of training sessions across both insurers and distributors, but you've got to keep doing it and you have to keep reminding people.
Thanks, Sam. Dave, I think Sam made some good points there about awareness. Do you think we as an industry do enough to let the likes of Macmillan or Citizens Advice or other agencies know that these things exist on a life insurance policy? And as Sam says, actually ask clients or patients to look at their policies to see if there's anything that can support?
I think we could do more. And I think that's not just the providers, that's the insurers. I think there's charities out there trying to do a really good job to help people in terms of awareness. I work with the Lung Cancer Foundation and I work with the Roy Castle Foundation. What always stuns me is there's a lot of stigma around illness, and a lot of people don't like to talk about their experience if they've had a critical illness, because there's almost a fear that if by talking about it, it's going to come back. Sam talked about case studies. I'm a huge fan, always have been. I think if you can tell a story that people can actually recognize and understand and see themselves in those shoes and explain the value that these services bring, it brings it to life. It makes people understand the need for them. In terms of working with charities, with the likes of the people you mentioned, I think most of us could actually reach out to these organizations and say, look, the British Heart Foundation, if you've got clients who have got an issue, if they've got a challenge, if they've got a concern, just ask them, do you have an insurance policy? The likelihood is they get access to these services at no cost. So again, helps all these things we're talking about. It drives revenue for IFAs because you sell more protection. It drives retention because more people use it, they understand the value and they want to keep the policies. And it drives referrals because when somebody says, well, how did you get access to that? You can say, well, I spoke to my IFA, my broker. Let me share the details with you.
Thanks, Dave. Really good points. Tim, what trends are you seeing in value-added services, usage across the market, are there any particular services or models that consistently drive higher engagement than others?
Yeah, so I think we do see quite a lot of take up of support services, particularly I think coming off the back of the pandemic, where obviously there's a lot of headlines about crisis in the NHS and challenging waiting times and difficulty seeing your GP. And I think that has driven quite a step change in just people searching for other options and finding services that they didn't even realize they had access to that are actually incredibly valuable to them. I think with any of these things, and sort of picking up on what Sam and David have said, it is very difficult to stay front of mind as an insurer with our policyholders. I think, there have been times where people have launched apps where they're hoping people will log in daily to see their step count and things. And I think we have to be realistic that very few people are going to sort of materially change their life as a result of the fact they've just bought a protection product. But nevertheless, it is a challenge for us to make sure we stay sort of engaged enough with our policyholders. So you mentioned annual benefit statements earlier, Vicky, and I think that's key. But I think even stepping that up to be, have newsletters quarterly or have some regular touch point that really just reminds policyholders that they have these services. And I also think we've talked about charities, and that's great that we have these relationships with charities and they can highlight these benefits that people didn't even realize they had. But it would also be great if we could raise awareness even further, and maybe the NHS could promote these things. As soon as somebody gets a cancer diagnosis, they're naturally told by their doctor, well, just go make sure that you haven't got any policies that might help you with these things. So yeah, I think there's a long way to go in order to improve take up of these services, I think.
Tim, that's really interesting. You talk about the digital side of things. When we were preparing for this call about 6 to 8 weeks ago, we talked about the different areas that we should cover. But life has really moved on in those last 6 to 8 weeks, incredibly. I'm going to ask what role AI now can play for value-added services in both helping customers understand the services that are available to them, but also how they might enhance value-added services. Dave, coming to you first, what's your thoughts on that?
Thanks for coming to me first on that question, Vicky. I think AI is something everybody in healthcare is interested in. It's proving the value. So we've started to look and use AI in certain areas. I think it's way too early to see how AI can help us promote the services and maybe get the message out there to customers.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So ChatGPT Health, for instance, has been announced earlier this year. I wrote an article about it and the threat it could have on our industry. Steve, do you see AI as a threat or as a friend?
I see it as a friend, but I think if we're not careful, it could quite easily be emperor's new clothes. All too often people are saying AI is going to do this, that and the other, etc. And it probably will within time, but we're at very embryonic stages of AI, especially around medical. When Google came apart, we had Dr. Google. So, people were going to their GP with 6 inches of paper saying, I've got every condition under the sun with Dr. Google. To a certain extent, I think we've got to see a little bit like that with AI. Without doubt, AI will improve performance, it will improve efficiencies, etc. But, at Square Health, we're a clinician-led business. We're owned and run by doctors. Everything we do has to be clinically correct, clinically approved. And whenever we look at anything, the first question we ask ourselves is, show us the data. Show us the data that if you don't walk on the steps, the cracks of the pavement, then you'll live another 5 years. So it has a part to play, certainly in the back office, certainly in improving efficiencies, etc. But as I say, we're at a very embryonic stage in my view.
Thanks, Steve. Sam, do you have a view?
Yeah, I'm going to go almost to the other end of the spectrum and just talk about some real life examples away from how does this help with my diagnosis, or how would it improve the process? And if I think about the type of patient or policyholder that comes to RedArc, where AI might actually be able to practically help them, if you are an elderly man, for example, whose wife has just died and you're having some bereavement support, and we do have patients like this, they've never cooked before. Now, but they're probably on the internet. The amount of resources you can find for what can I cook with what I've got in my fridge, or what have I got in my larder, or in the kitchen cupboard, those type of things can be really helpful. Or I'm doing some exercise because that's what my nurses encourage me to do. And I'm getting a bit bored and I'm not going to speak to them until next week. I can use that for some prompts. So I think there are some, without going to, as Steve said, the Dr. Google and getting into the clinical aspect of it, I think there are some really practical things that help people in their recovery journey that AI could be very useful for, that keep us away from the sort of dangers of going down AI doing everything for us. So I would say focus on the practical application of it.
Really interesting angle. Thanks, Sam. Tim, do you have a view?
Yeah, I mean, I think coming back to the raising awareness of the products that people actually already have, I think AI could have a role to play here as well. So increasingly, people will just go to ChatGPT and ask it whatever their current problem of the day is. So you can well imagine that people, having just been diagnosed with a condition, will just log in and say, I've been diagnosed with XYZ. What should I do next? And if we can, a lot of money has been spent in the last 20 years on search engine optimization. And I think that's going to shift now towards optimizing websites or online content or general presence of organizations to make sure that ChatGPT, when it harvests everyone's data, really picks up your own. So, for example, having very long FAQ sections on websites, I've heard as an idea, to make sure that you're providing those answers to these engines so that they can spit them back when they're asked them. So if that was coming back with, well, check your insurance policies, lots have value-added services, there's all sorts of things out there that you might have access to that could help, then that would be a great step forward.
I think that's a great idea. That SEO is really important because the questions are being asked differently today to Claude, ChatGPT, other Google, other sort of AI bots. Is how can I be helped with this illness or injury or whatever? And it is completely different from a Google search. So really good points. Jamie, lastly, any thoughts on AI helping value-added services from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question and some interesting responses by the panel today. From my perspective, and also some of the work that we've done with Amy Viewpoint, I think we need to be meeting the customers where they want to be met. So if that is actually online and through AI, what services are available and what we can provide to make sure that they've got the right data, they've got the right details in order for them to take that forward. But actually, if a customer, or in our case, a member as a mutual, want to contact us or want to contact the advisor to understand more, then we should have those accessible information to them as well at that point. I do think that AI has a place for us in this industry. Some of the things that we've already mentioned around some of the admin, promoting value-added services, or the contact points for a customer. But there really is nothing better than talking to somebody, having that open and honest chat, having that compassion, the emotional intelligence side of it as well. And I don't believe we can lose that within our industry.
Thanks, Jamie. So we are coming to the end now. We're running out of time, but it's been great hearing all your views. So I'm going to come to each of you and just ask you one last question, if I may. I'm also going to ask myself this question at the end because I have a view, believe it or not. And my question to you is, what's the one thing that the industry needs to do better with in terms of value-added services? And I'm going to come to you first, Sam, if I may.
Thank you. My suggestion would be that we work together better as value-added service providers, because one of the things we're trying to do is to fill in gaps around provision. And what we mustn't do is create a gap between us and ourselves and provision that we provide. So I would like to see, there's a risk that as an insurer, you've almost got a matrix and a grid of, I've got this service, that service, that service, rather than thinking about think about it in a competitive way as opposed to a patient or a client way. So I would like us to see us work better. So for example, we work with a couple of the AP providers and other mental health providers, and we work with each other on behalf of the insurer. And I think that we should be doing more of that.
Thank you very much, Sam. Jamie?
Yeah, for me, and we have mentioned a bit of this throughout, but the industry needs to stop treating value-added services as a point-of-sale feature and start treating it really as a life cycle benefit. Too often it's mentioned once, it's ticked off, and then it's forgotten about. And I think the real value shows up when customers actually use these services over time. They feel supported day in and day out. And if we get that right, value-added services won't just support products, it will support genuinely better customer outcomes.
Thanks, Jamie. Steve?
I think I would say is, let's be clear, I think value-add services, essential services, have probably been the best or greatest innovation in protection in the last 20 years. However, the message I would leave is tell them again. Communication is absolutely key. And whether you use case studies, whatever you use, let's just keep the dialogue going with the end customer.
Thank you, Steve. Kevin?
I think something that's come up time and time again today is definitely case studies for one, and then the word value, because if we're not demonstrating the value, how is the client able to actually see the benefits of using this policy?
Thanks, Kevin. Dave?
Okay. You've all touched on it already. It's the messaging, it's the case stories, it's getting news out there. Insurance is sold because bad things happen to people. We all think it's not going to happen to us. Or fortunately now, I'm an unwitting case study for protection. And a couple of you know this, but I was diagnosed with non-smokers lung cancer 2 weeks. So 14 days after my wife finished chemotherapy for colon cancer. When I was seeing my doctors, they were saying to me, you've got a chest infection, keep taking the antibiotics. And it got to the point where they were saying, you don't need to keep getting in touch with us. It takes time to recuperate. And it was using an added value service. It was speaking to one of the GPs here at Teladoc, because I've got access through my own protection policy, where somebody said, no, let's pause. Let's do some other tests because we're concerned about you. And that's what caught my cancer. I had a 2-week window to get surgery. So added value services, again, which is a terrible name, integral services. Integral services stopped my critical illness claim being a life claim for my wife. And you've got to get that message out there, because the reality is bad things happen, but there's something there to support you all the way.
Thank you, Dave. Tim?
So I think at product design stage, we can make much more of the fact that there is a natural alignment of interest between policyholders and insurers. Policyholders want to be healthier, insurers want them to be healthier. And I think we can really use that as a driver of product design and exactly what value-added services we think we need. I think all too often we can be a bit purist in the protection industry and think, oh, people should want protection just for the joy of having protection. And actually, if we design products that are sort of provide all sorts of lifestyle and health benefits, and protection is just one part of that, then that's great. That means that people are getting the protection they need, but the value-added services become much more front and center to the product.
Thank you, Tim. So here's mine. So I've been listening to you guys talking, and as you've been speaking, what I've been hearing is collaboration and working together. Tell them again. Case studies, change the name. So one of the things that we've done at the IPTF is we created a short 2.5-minute video called Building Blocks of Life, Protect Your Everyday. It's one of the most downloaded, well, it is the most downloaded thing from our website, and it's used in a lot of advisor calls. We're currently creating another video for another sector of the market. Would it be useful if we created a short value-added services video in collaboration with our members, value-added service members, reinsurers and insurers and advisors, that told the story very simply in 2.5 minutes, so it can be used on TikTok and it can be used on social media, and that's the idea. And particularly for those who haven't got time to watch long case studies or videos. Would that be useful?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very much.
Yeah. So if I come back to you with some details on that, I think that's a commitment that the IPTF can make to you as members, but we'll need your input. And if we start with the people on this call, I think that could be a good place to begin.
Definitely. Sounds like a great initiative.
Okay, I think that's a good place to end on a positive, something that we can do, something that's actionable and something you think that will help. So thank you very much, Steve, Tim, Dave, Sam, Jamie, Kevin. And thank you to Stevie from C Studios for recording this. It's been fantastic conversation, and I think there's more conversations to be had, but really a good place to start. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.